The city of LaPorte is a charming East Texas town on the shores of Galveston Bay. Today, LaPorte is a thriving city of more than 30,000 citizens. LaPorte is uniquely situated between two ports and a pipeline corridor that make it a gold mine for industrial growth. The chemical, gas, and oil industries, combined with a vibrant aerospace and medical industry, create a thriving economy and a busy workforce in the city. But before those industries came to East Texas, people came to LaPorte for its proximity to the bay and the abundant land just 22 miles east of what was becoming a major trade center in Houston. LaPorte began as a real estate venture by a group of developers and colonizers from Denver, Colorado. A sale of lots was held on January 1st, 1892. And on October 7th of that same year, the LaPorte, Houston, and Northern Railroad was chartered, and the city was officially incorporated. By 1895, the railroad had laid track on 13 miles of the 22 from Houston to LaPorte, and by 1900, the Moonlight Excursion was putting LaPorte on the map, with nightly trips from Houston Central Depot. LaPorte seemed doomed in 1915 when a devastating fire and storm hit the city within 6 weeks of each other, leaving much of the city in ruins. But the people who had fallen in love with the cool breezes and lovely view of Galveston Bay rebuilt and pressed forward, leaving a long legacy of pride and a sense of place for generations who've happily claimed LaPorte as their home.
I was born in the upstairs above my dad's shop. My grandparents came in 1895, I believe it was. They had a little farm down on 4th and that block down there. They had cows and horses and pigeons, had thousands and thousands of pigeons. And the city said you can't have pigeons anymore, so he hauled them off, and when they all came back, they were homing pigeons.
I was born in 1929. I was born in Morgan's Point, but it was LaPorte then.
I am Rachel Broussard, and I was born in LaPorte, Texas, August 12, 1947.
My great-grandfather came to LaPorte in the 1890s and had the first power plant here in LaPorte. It's called LaPorte Gas, Ice, and Electric.
I was born in Athens, Louisiana in 1924.
I was born in Gippsland, Louisiana, and I came to LaPorte in 1930.
My parents and grandparents were all raised here. Early settlers were my grandparents, John and Lillian Nelson. I'm a 4th generation LaPortean, and I just loved growing up in LaPorte.
While many of LaPorte's residents were born and raised here, many others came for business opportunities. Some had more dramatic introductions to the area than others.
Oh my goodness. It was the craziest thing. All kinds of goofy things happened right away. That was in the winter that we moved over here in December. And then in January, I believe it was, there was a bad freeze. And the wind blew real hard from the north and it blew the water out of the bay. So we were able to walk all the way out to the end of the piers on frozen mud. That was unusual.
My grandfather, John Ziba Sharp, came from outside of Watertown, New York. He wanted to get away from all of that ice and snow that blows in from Lake Ontario during the winter. He rode the train down to Houston, and when he got off the train in Houston, he stepped into a big old puddle of snow.
That spring, when it began getting warm, the tarantulas appeared from somewhere. The tarantulas were everywhere. Big old hairy spiders, and they would stand up and they'd challenge the lawnmower. And the kids would run over them on the street with their bicycles. It was scary. I'm scared of spiders anyway. Ann Malone lives right there on the corner where I think they were hatching on her corner. And she got them in her house. She said that she opened their cabinet door in the kitchen and there was one up there. She just swept them out. She wasn't afraid of them.
I was born July 31st in 1943 when the hurricane came through. Somehow my mother was in Shoracres and all the trees had fallen down over the road. And when she was trying to get to the hospital, she was climbing over all the downed trees so she could get out from where we were to get to the road where the car could pick her up and take her to St. Joseph's Hospital. They say that the hurricane of 1943 kind of blew away LaPorte, but kind of blew Maggie in.
This is a funny story. We moved to Texas because my father had heard that there were U-boats, submarines, out in the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, and we lived in Santa Barbara. And he was thinking he was saving his family by bringing them to LaPorte, or to Texas. And so we moved to Texas in the summer of '42. I learned from Mr. Jimmy Counts recently that the storm, the hurricane that came to LaPorte in 1943, they didn't announce it because there were submarines in the Gulf of Mexico. He may have never known that there were submarines out in the Gulf.
And then in the next year we had Hurricane Carla that summer. So we thought, what kind of a place is this?
The city of LaPorte has always been known as a warm, friendly place for people to live, work, and play. And, like most small towns in America, Main Street was the center of the town and the place where everyone wanted to be.
Everything and everybody came there on Saturday. It was the meeting place, the greeting place on the Saturday shopping. The vendors and the people, the merchants that were there, everybody knew your name and you knew that's where you shopped, that's where you went.
When we came here, there was all kind of shopping on Main Street. You couldn't find a place to park on Main Street, and that was nice.
A variety store and an ice cream parlor. Upstairs above that were apartments. The Simpson Cafe was in there, and then the Porte Theater.
And then you had two hardware stores, which is LaPorte Hardware, owned by my aunt and uncle. And then you had Thomas Hardware. He would sell mostly fishing tackle supplies like that.
We had two little grocery stores in town, and we had clothing stores, all kinds of different shops on Main Street.
Up there by 8th Street, we had a store called Lucky 7 Grocery. Then when you come back down, we had Najo's grocery store. And then on the ups, go down a few blocks from Mr. Najo's and go across, you had Mr. Eisensee's.
Well, about a year after we got here, he started working there, and he worked there until, I think, until that place, until it closed up. Then he knew everybody, all the people that come in and shop there, and he had jokes to tell, and I think he just had a good time working there.
Half of them, he gave the food to them, and they didn't have to pay for them.
I remember Eisensee's very well because my mother used to make her groceries there. I don't know what it was something about every Saturday, almost everybody black on Saturdays made their groceries.
And then Red and White Grocery, and then Safeway Grocery, and Kirkpatrick Cleaners, and then the IGA Grocery. Then there were.
Isn't it amazing? Can't remember yesterday.
But
sitting here just.
Many Main Street business owners took advantage of the street's proximity to the railroad. One of those business owners was George Sharp, whose feed store was right next to the rail line. Today, the Sharp store is the home of Roloff's Antiques, founded by Roloff and Judy Nguyen-Weiss. When they discovered the feed store, it had been abandoned for 7 years and had fallen into disrepair. Rather than tear it down, the couple decided to restore it, showing the beauty of the original structure and housing a small museum on the back of the store celebrating the history of the building and its prominent place in LaPorte's story. Ronald Sharp worked there as a boy, and he has some fond memories of his time there.
If we had to load a truck, like if we were unloading feed from a boxcar, we would take it on some of these little two-wheel casters over here, and we would load into the boxcar and run down this ramp and make a turn and run like everything toward that ramp and run that dolly up in that ramp into that truck. And we'd be running up there, and then once in a while my mother would get in the way. She wouldn't watch where we was going, and we'd have to stop real quick, stop the truck, and the feed would just fall off the little dolly, you know. And it was quite a hassle to get the truck loaded.
My daddy bought the store in 1944. It was Linwood's Dry Goods. We lived upstairs. It had a balcony, which it still does around it. I used to walk the balcony. And the people that across the street that had the businesses like the Williams Liquor Store and at that time Bobby's Cafe, they would look up and I'd be walking the balcony over Main Street. And they'd come running across the street to tell Daddy to get me down.
They would have living quarters above most of the stores on Main Street at that time, and they would have little awnings that would come out over the sidewalk, or they would have balconies. And you'd see that we came by at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you could see the people out there in their rocking chair with their coffee in their hand, and it was high enough they could probably see the water in the bay.
My grandparents had a boarding house and filling station there, the Nelson boarding house and filling station at that time. One of the boarders that lived there was on the Titanic. He went down on the Titanic.
Oh, that was a thrill. Nelson's gas station, the thrill was to get up there and Mr. Nelson would let me pump the gas. You know, they had the handle on the side and the big glass thing at the top, and the gasoline was all kind of colors then. It was orange and red and yellow, and then Dr. Aves had a little building next door. He was a wonderful doctor. He could not or didn't want to remember names, so everybody was Doc.
And you got painted with purple.
And bismuth violet was his trademark.
Didn't make any difference if you had a cold, whatever. You came out all painted up with that purple stuff.
We all
it took
lived.
days
We're
for it
still
to
alive.
go away.
Yeah. We all lived.
Some of us kids would be playing out on the sidewalk, and he'd walk out of the doctor's office and give us a dime to go down to the drugstore to buy an ice cream or candy or whatever.
I remember one time I was running in the house, which you're not supposed to run in the house. I cut my knee and it was gapped open, and they picked me up and they took me to Dr. Aves' office, who was the old-time doctor who was in the next block from us. And I remembered him sewing us up, and you could feel the strings being pulled through. They didn't use, I don't think, deadening at that time, and I remember screaming and screaming, and I remember him taking out the stitches. The memories I have of Dr. Aves was short, round, and with a needle that pulled through your skin.
The residents who grew up in LaPorte were never at a loss for something to do. They went shopping on Main Street, patronized the local theater, and, as a special treat, enjoyed eating out in their favorite restaurants.
Bobby's Cafe had the best food. They had the biggest hamburgers anywhere around. They were so big you had to get them cut in half. Couldn't hardly get them in your mouth. I used to walk down there from junior high many times with Karen, Bussy Walker, and we'd go down there and have lunch. And if we were lucky, somebody would be in there and see us and buy us lunch. And a lot of times we'd just go in there for a bowl of mashed potatoes and gravy and a piece of pie. It was a wonderful restaurant.
And then you had 3 drugstores. You had Powell's Pharmacy, and then you had Bartley's Pharmacy, where my grandmother had her ice cream confectionery.
Going to the ice cream parlor and getting a double-decker that really was a double-decker. I mean, it was big, yeah.
Really, it was a triple. It was.
Well, it was a
double
cone.
cone, and then
Have you
one
ever
on
seen
top.
them? Oh, that was.
And then one
we
on
thought
top.
we died and gone to heaven if we could save up enough money to go do that.
Cost a whole nickel.
Yeah. If you didn't get your allowance that week, you didn't go for ice cream.
Bob's and Marie's was probably the best. It's right here on the corner of San Jacinto. We had 7 kids. We didn't eat out too much. Couldn't all fit in one car. So it was pretty tough.
Then you had 8 LaPorte drugstore. Catty corner from there was owned by Clyde Agee, and his wife was my first grade teacher.
Mr. Agee was very nice to the little urchins that ran the street, with no supervision there neither, I might add. We would go down to Agee's and we'd be able to sit in front of the comic book or the magazine section and sit on the floor and read the magazines as long as you didn't mess them up.
I used to go in all the time and I would sit they had this long rack with all the magazines because I loved Cosmopolitan and all those magazines when I was a girl. Never had any money to buy one, but they allowed me to look at them as long as I put them back exactly like they was, and I would always do that.
They just were very nice to us. I mean, everybody on Main Street was they watched out for everybody. They took care of everybody, and they were just a small town family community effort.
There was a movie theater, and that was the Texan. Later on, we got the Porte Theater. It was really uptown then when we got that.
When they were building the Porte Theater, they had a big ladder that they had leaned against all the way to the roof of the Porte Theater. All of a sudden, somebody again came running into the store telling Daddy that one of his kids was doing something they shouldn't be. And my 3-year-old brother had climbed this ladder by himself and had gone up and was sitting on the top on the edge, dangling his feet over the edge of this building. So Daddy had to climb up there and get him down.
We had the Porte Theater downtown. A friend of mine's dad was the manager of it, so I'd sneak in every once in a while. And good time.
I went to the show a lot. It became the babysitter. On Saturday, of course, that was the thing to do for everybody in LaPorte. It was 9 cents. Plus, you got a goodie bag, you got a bag of stuff in it.
On Saturdays, they had the show for 25 cents. You go in and you see several feature films and cereals and cartoons, and you get a little box of candy with a prize in it. And that was an all-day affair. Usually I'd take my lunch in there because that was just an all-day affair. See all your friends and visit.
We had to go upstairs because the whites sat downstairs, we sat upstairs.
They'd have the ticket office here, and everybody buy their ticket there. Then they had a door here that we'd go upstairs.
The ones downstairs wanted to be up there with us. Because you really could see better. That's the way they segregated us.
And we got real good movies because the man that managed the movies, managed the show, he was in with the big shots in Houston, you know, where you could get the movies, rent them.
I can remember later in later years, I took some of my children and I pulled 2 or 3 of them in a wagon, and one of them was walking, and we went to see The Wizard of Oz at the Porte Theater. That was really a big treat, you know.
There was a movie going on, and I remember going from the right to the left across the stage while the movie was going on. Like, you know, you'd be watching the movie and you've got children running across this while the screen was going on. That was our entertainment, I guess.
When people wanted to venture outside of LaPorte, they had many transportation options, but some were a bit more limiting than others.
When I was a kid, I rode my tricycle down to 2-3 blocks there and got milk from my grandmother. She took coffee cans and tied on the back of my tricycle axle and calf muzzle on the front, and I got 3 quarts of milk, carried them back and forth that way.
And one time we was on a trip, that's back when the roads were shell roads, and we were in a Model T Ford. And we was going along, well, a bumblebee stung me. I screamed, they stopped on the side of the road. Daddy always smoked Prince Albert. He put a wad in his mouth, chewed it up, and put it on the bite, and of course it went away. And that's the way they did in those days.
We would take our dates to Baytown. We took our girls on their bicycles and hauled out to Baytown.
I wasn't one of them.
No, that was in the 40s. Getting up and down that big hill at Morgan's Point was pretty tough on a bicycle, pedaling along there with the gal on the bicycle.
We were the rich people. We had a car. We had a car. 1934 Ford.
He knew how to drive. Daddy didn't even know we could drive. He would ride to work with somebody else, and he'd go to work, we'd get in his car and drive it. You know? Daddy had a flatbed Model T and also a touring car. Well, one day we were going in the flatbed truck. I kept saying, it's hot, and of course they'd look back and say, don't
don't move, you'll fall off, don't move. And I kept saying, it's hot, it's hot. Finally, my sister smelled smoke. So she stopped to check it out. And I was sitting on the quilt that I was on was already scorched. But I didn't move. And it had rained, you know, so it was water in the ditch. So she found a can and poured it on it, and we kept on going.
I didn't have a car until 5 of us bought a car, and it was a 1928 Rio, and 5 of us owned this thing, and we shared it. We got 4 gallons of gas a week. Gasoline was 12 and 14 cents. And we would save our gas coupons and go to the Rice football games. It took 2.5 hours to get to Rice Stadium from here.
Today, if LaPorte residents want to travel across the ship channel, they take the Fred Hartman Bridge, the longest cable-stayed bridge in Texas. It connects Baytown and LaPorte and provides a stunning view of the Houston Ship Channel. But getting from point A to point B wasn't always so easy. The bridge was built in 1995 to replace the Baytown Tunnel, a 2-lane underwater motor vehicle tunnel connecting Baytown and LaPorte. But before the bridge, and before the tunnel, there was what came to be known as the Morgan's Point Ferry, which connected the north and south sides of the Houston Ship Channel when the Tabbs Bay Causeway opened in 1933. The causeway was eventually destroyed by Hurricane Carla in 1961. By then, the ferry had stopped running, but many LaPorte residents have fond memories of taking the ferry back and forth across the causeway.
People that worked on this side of the channel spent hours down at getting across the ferry, across the ship channel. It was kind of interesting. Some of the people that developed there, we had a fellow on a little platform with roller skates underneath it. He had no legs, and he peddled popcorn and stuff like that to the people waiting for the ferry.
Well, back in my day, the ferry was running. And one of the games we played was to sit on our front porch, and as each load of cars would come by, we each had a make of car, and whoever got the most makes won the game. And back then, they didn't have all these different kind of cars. They just had a Chevrolet, a Ford, and a DeSoto, a Plymouth, and such as that. But that was one of our games. We made up our games. We didn't have all these toys that kids have today.
I was a little girl, but I remember that when we had to go to Baytown, we had to go across on the ferry. And we used to go to Morgan's Point. I was scared. Really? Too much water. I don't know, I always thought that ferry was gonna sink with us. I could look at that car and I'd see all that water and look like it'd be bubbling up. I told my sister one day, I said, that water's gonna get us. That water's gonna get us. Now my sister next to me, she was a little braver. She would get out and my uncle would, if my uncle took us, she'd get out and he would hold her hand, not me. I was staying in the car. For some reason, I thought that car was gonna protect me. I probably was in the worst place, staying in the car, but in my mind, the car was the best place for me.
I think the biggest treat was my grandmother going to Baytown to shop. At that time, LaPorte had little stores, but we didn't have the big Baytown stores. And so we would get in our Model T Ford and go down to Morgan's Point and pull up in line to do the ferry. I remember standing in line, of course, and getting out and playing while you're waiting on the ferry to get there, and there'd be vendors selling peanuts, hawkers, whatever you want to call them, going from car to car trying to sell the peanuts. And I'm sure they weren't but 5 cents a bag if they were that much.
Sometimes you had to wait on weekends, you know, you'd have to wait sometime an hour or two before we could get on the ferry.
And we never wanted to be on the front. That first car.
You'd be on with another boy on the ferry, then your boyfriend would catch you in the car.
And we used to get out of the cars and dance on the ferry.
Did you? Yeah. The boys would get out and fight on the ferry.
DuPont would get off at 4, and at 4:15, they would have an equivalent to the Indianapolis Speedway. Everybody was racing down to try to get the first spot on the ferry. and you'd see these cars speeding down, and they had this railroad track across the street. You'd see those cars, you can tell when they had bad shock absorbers go, boom, boom, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And then Dale Richardson, who was the constable, parked right across the street from the store here and had a lot of loose gravel on the road. And when those cars would start going by, he'd step down on the gas and he'd start throwing that gravel. He'd just start spinning. I think about 30 seconds he'd eventually make it up to 146 and start heading out and try to catch some of those speeders, you know. Oh, it was something.
Sylvan Beach has a long history as a place for music, dance, and entertainment. When LaPorte was incorporated in 1892, a portion of 22 acres was reserved as the town park. The first big organized celebration at Sylvan Beach took place on the 4th of July in 1893. Back then, the park was called Sylvan Grove, and the celebration featured a pony race, hot air balloons, and dancing. The beach enjoyed growing popularity among visitors and residents alike, until the devastating storm of 1915 nearly wiped it out. Enterprising businessman Ed Eisman decided to resurrect the Sylvan Beach Resort, and it was reopened in 1916, complete with the holiday excursion train, which rolled in from Houston, showing that Sylvan Beach was open for business once again. The Roaring Twenties saw the first beauty pageants at Sylvan Beach, a tradition that continues today. The first Houston annual Bathing Girl Review was held in 1924.
Well, I was in the Sylvan Beach Festival beauty pageant for 3 years, starting with my 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. We had a boardwalk, kind of like the ones that you'd see in the old pictures, where they had it built up high and not very wide to walk on. And sometimes some of us would get our heels caught into the crack of the board and kind of wobble around on that, but it was fun. And then they had the big dance that night, Saturday night, where they crowned the girls, and then they had the big band orchestra down there playing. It was just good memories.
In 1932, Sylvan Beach saw another transformation when, in the throes of the Depression, Ed Crane and Associates of Houston bought Sylvan Beach Park. They invested $25,000 in making it the Coney Island of the South. They renovated and landscaped the entire property, adding a long boardwalk, a beautiful dance pavilion, and amusement devices like bumper cars and swings.
I can remember Sylvan Beach when they had the rides, Ferris wheel horses, you know, the race horses, and of course it was kind of small. It wasn't like it is now. The Ferris wheel wasn't all that high, and you were caged in then, but it still was high enough for me. I was scared. I have always been a coward.
The ballroom on the bay, an early incarnation of what is now known as the Sylvan Beach Pavilion, hosted big band orchestras and popular entertainers like Artie Shaw and Rudy Valley.
People from Houston would get that train and come down to Sylvan Beach. They had a hotel there, and they would stay overnight. You know?
The movie stars.
Yeah.
I remember Dorothy Lamour. You remember her? She was at one of the stores up in LaPorte. I thought that was really something I saw.
Well, my mother would tell me about the Sylvan Beach when she was growing up as a teenager and young girl, that she would go down there and dance to the big bands, and about all the people from Houston where they'd ride the trains and come in and get off the trains. It was just a big playground for wonderful, wonderful entertainers to come in.
The hurricane of 1943 completely destroyed the pavilion and the park. What was left lay dormant for many years, until the LaPorte Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary Club, and other community groups convinced the Harris County Commissioners to purchase the land and develop it into a county-operated park. Harris County bought the park in 1954, and the commissioners built a smaller, glassed-in dance pavilion at one end of the grounds, as well as a boat launch, public restrooms, and a new fishing pier.
There was a little beach that went along the bayfront all the way from Garfield Boulevard to the pavilion. They had a dance every Saturday night, and we went to every dance that they had. These were orchestras from Houston, and sometimes they would have maybe a 20-piece orchestra, the very best.
Well, they built it, remodeled it, did it all over, and
but we were segregated
just for whites. And we didn't get to go for quite a while, but 2 or 3 black lawyers and doctors came down here and went there, and they said that was illegal because it was a county deal, you know. So they took it to court. From then on, we've been going full steam ahead. It's been real nice. They have big dances down there, and B.B. King and all that kind of game.
Sylvan Beach, yep.
By the time I was 16, my mother wouldn't let me go to some dances that they had down at Sylvan Beach in the pavilion. I got a chance to see James Brown the year he came, and Jackie Wilson. It was exciting for me.
They used to have a baseball field over at Sylvan Beach, what is now the bait stand area, and that was the field we played on mostly. I got the first home run off of the field down there when they built it, so I was proud of that.
There used to be a baseball field over there, and that was a big thing on Sunday. My daddy, when he was alive, would take us to the baseball games down there. They was like professional baseball players. There's a lot of the guys still around that played baseball down there. And I think at one time they had, like, I'm going to say exposition games. I don't know, because I think at one time somewhere they might have played the blacks against the white. My dad died when I was 10, so that's something that I always remember, that he did take us to the ball games on Sunday afternoon.
The pier was there, the picnic area was there. It was pretty common for us to come down on weekends and fish. Of course, it was free to fish on the pier then. But we would catch stringers of something and take it home, and Mama would cook it.
There were, I don't know, 5 or 6 little boys all about the same age that ganged up, you know, and they'd go gar fishing. They'd catch a gar, and then they'd take all of them to pull him up on the shore.
They could just tie him on behind their bicycle and drag him off until somebody offered to buy him.
Were they good eating?
Oh, yeah.
Some people eat them.
Yeah.
They get $1 for one.
All the churches get together and have sunrise service, and it's real nice.
And you could watch that sunrise up over that water. It's so beautiful.
The people of LaPorte share a love of life and a great sense of humor. That sense of humor traversed the generations. Many pranks that were pulled in LaPorte's earlier days were met with good humor.
It was fun growing up in LaPorte then, because things that we did not become major criminal things. You know, if the boys on Halloween went and stripped somebody's orange tree, they didn't get put in jail for it. They got reprimanded, but, you know, it wasn't a big major thing.
One of the funniest things that I remember was one Halloween, 2 couples of us had driven down to the park at Shore Acres. The guys decided, oh, wouldn't it be fun to turn over the playground equipment? Which they did. They got out of the car and turned over all the playground equipment, and when they'd finished it, a police officer came up and said, now you boys can upright the playground equipment that you turned over. So he had been somewhere and was observing all this.
His group, they put the superintendent's outhouse up on top of the bank building. Now, if they did that now, I don't know what they'd do to them.
Regardless of how they ended up here, LaPorte holds a special place in people's hearts. Many longtime residents came here intending to stay just a few years, but when it came time to leave, they couldn't stay away from the cool breezes and warm waters of Galveston Bay.
LaPorte is home. When I married, I said, I hope I never move, because when I was growing up, we moved a lot, and I have never moved. I became a bride in the house that I'm living in today.
We've seen people leave LaPorte, and they can't wait. You know, they get retired and they just got to go somewhere. And pretty soon they're trying to buy back their house that they sold, and they're back.
You come back to the friendliness, you come back to the people you know, and hopefully you come back to make it a better place.
I've been in LaPorte all my life. I've been to other cities, been to other states. I haven't been to a lot of states, but the states that I've been to, I always chose to come back to LaPorte. I don't like it.
I think if you'll travel the whole world, you'll find out that the people make the difference.
They're like brothers and sisters to us. You know, everybody's just best friends.
There's still a very good people here in LaPorte, a lot of good people, and you're glad that you're here.
I don't think anybody chooses to stay in LaPorte. I think you just come home.